Picture this. It's 1979. The Bee Gees are still clinging to the charts. America is standing in gas lines wondering if muscle cars are dead forever. And buried inside Chevrolet's assembly plants, workers are building what would become the best-selling Camaro in history, while hiding secrets that would shock even the most hardcore bow-tie fanatics. The 1979 Z28 wasn't just a survivor of the malaise era. It was a rolling contradiction packed with engineering compromises, corporate conspiracies, and bizarre decisions that General Motors hoped would stay buried forever. Number 1. Here's something that'll blow your mind right out of the gate. The 1979 Z28 was supposed to have a completely different engine, not the LM1350 that everyone knows. Chevrolet engineering had developed a destroked 400 cubic inch small block, specifically for the Z28 that would have made over 200 horsepower, while still meeting emission standards. The engine used a shorter stroke crank to bring displacement down to 377 cubic inches, keeping it under the GM corporate mandate that banned engines over 350 cubic inches in mid-size cars. Dyno testing showed this engine was a monster, producing more torque than any small block Chevy ever offered in a production Camaro. The power curve was incredibly flat, with massive low-end grunt that made the car feel genuinely fast, even by pre-emission standards. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. 3 weeks before production start, GM's bean counters discovered that building the special 377 engine would cost an extra $112 per unit compared to using the existing 350. They killed the entire program to save money, despite having already invested over $3 million in development and tooling. All the prototype engines were ordered destroyed, but at least 2 survived and ended up in private hands. These engines exist today in collector garages, representing what could have been the greatest small block Chevrolet ever built. The decision to cancel the 377 haunted Chevrolet engineers for years, with several admitting in later interviews that it was the biggest mistake of the entire malaise era. Today, finding documentation about this lost engine is nearly impossible since GM destroyed most records when the program was canceled. Number 2. The 79 Z28's paint codes hide one of the most bizarre quality control disasters in GM history, and most owners have absolutely no idea their cars are affected. During the first 6 months of production, the paint mixing system at both the Norwood and Van Nuys assembly plants was using incorrect ratios for metallic colors due to a computer programming error that nobody caught until thousands of cars had already been painted. The error affected every single metallic paint option, including the popular dark blue, metallic, black, and silver, causing the metallic flake content to be nearly 40% lower than specifications called for. This meant the paint looked duller and less vibrant than it was supposed to, but the difference was subtle enough that most people didn't notice. Quality control inspectors were comparing cars to color chips that were also incorrect, so everything appeared to match, even though nothing was right. The problem was discovered only when dealers started complaining that 79 cars looked noticeably different from 78 models in the same colors. GM sent engineers to investigate and found the programming error, but here's the truly scandalous part. Instead of recalling the affected cars or offering free repaints, Chevrolet simply fixed the computer system and pretended nothing had happened. They never notified dealers or customers about the paint defect. Today, early production 79 Z28s in metallic colors have objectively inferior paint that doesn't match later production cars or factory specifications. Restoration experts can identify these cars by checking the paint code date stamps and comparing metallic flake density to known correct examples. The affected cars are actually more valuable to some collectors is because they represent a documented factory error, but most owners still don't know their paint was never right from day one. Number 3. The Z28's famous Ducttail spoiler wasn't just a styling element, it was hiding a structural problem that Chevrolet discovered too late to fix without redesigning the entire rear body panel. During wind tunnel testing in late '78, engineers found that at speeds above 80 miles per hour, the rear deck lid would actually flex upward due to aerodynamic lift, creating a gap between the deck lid and the body that allowed exhaust fumes to enter the cabin through the poorly sealed trunk gaskets. This was a legitimate safety problem that could cause carbon monoxide poisoning during highway driving. The Ducttail spoiler was hastily designed as a band-aid fix, using its downforce to literally hold the deck lid down against the body and prevent it from flexing. But here's the kicker that makes this story even crazier. The spoiler only worked if it was installed with very specific torque specifications on the mounting bolts. Too loose and the deck lid would still flex. Too tight and the fiberglass spoiler would crack under the stress. Assembly line workers were supposed to use torque wrenches set to exactly 18 foot-pounds, but in the rush of mass production, many workers just tightened the bolts by feel. This resulted in thousands of Z28s, leaving the factory with either ineffective spoilers that didn't prevent deck lid flex or over-tightened spoilers that developed stress cracks within months. GM issued a service bulletin about proper spoiler installation torque, but it went only to dealerships, and most customers never knew about it. Today, finding a 79 Z28 spoiler without stress cracks around the mounting points is extremely rare because the over-torquing problem was so widespread. Many restoration shops now use reinforced reproduction spoilers specifically engineered to handle improper installation torque that the originals couldn't survive. Number 4. Every 79 Z28 came standard with a specific rear axle ratio of 3.73 to 1, but internal GM documents revealed that approximately 1,200 cars were accidentally built with completely different gear ratios ranging from 2.56 to 1 all the way up to 4.11 to 1 due to a parts tracking system failure at the differential assembly plant. The computer system that matched gear sets to specific vehicle orders crashed in December of '78 and stayed down for nearly 3 weeks. During that time, workers were grabbing random gear sets from inventory bins and installing whatever they found, with no systematic way to ensure the correct ratio was going into each car. The results were absolutely wild. Some Z28s ended up with economy car gearing that made them painfully slow off the line, but relatively fuel efficient on the highway. Others got ultra-aggressive racing ratios that made them incredibly quick, but caused the engine to scream at highway speeds while destroying fuel economy. A few cars somehow ended up with gear ratios that weren't even supposed to exist in the GM parts catalog, suggesting workers were mixing and matching components in ways that created custom ratios nobody had ever tested. When the computer system came back online, GM discovered the problem, but faced a nightmare scenario. They had no way to know which specific cars got which gear ratios, because all the build records were lost during the crash. The decision was made to simply ignore the problem and hope customers wouldn't notice. Most didn't, because people's only reference point was magazine road tests that showed wildly varying performance numbers depending on which incorrectly geared press car was tested. Today, verifying the original gear ratio in a 79 Z28 requires physically checking the differential and comparing the actual ratio to what the build sheet claims it should be. Number 5. The Z28's distinctive striping and graphics package hides a secret that drove assembly line workers crazy and caused production delays costing GM millions. The stripes used heat-activated adhesive bonded with special heat guns, but the supplier changed the formula without notifying GM, requiring significantly higher temperatures to activate properly. For the first 2 months, workers applied stripes using old temperature settings, causing partial activation, but not full bonding. The stripes looked perfect leaving the factory, but peeled off within weeks, especially around curves where stress was highest. When GM discovered the adhesive change, they faced an ugly choice: recall thousands of cars or quietly fix the problem going forward. They chose option 2, updating heat gun temperatures while pretending early failures were owner neglect. Frustrated workers started using unauthorized super glue to make stripes stick, which worked better but made them impossible to remove without paint damage. Today, early production S28s show peeling that purists consider authentic patina, while later cars remain firmly bonded. Number 6. The interior of the 79 Z28 featured special high-back bucket seats that Chevrolet marketed as exclusive performance seating. But here's what they never told buyers. These seats were actually rejected components from the Corvette program that didn't meet quality standards for America's sports car, but were considered acceptable for the cheaper Camaro. Internal GM memos detail how the seats failed Corvette durability testing because the seat frames would develop stress cracks after simulated long-term use, and the foam padding would compress unevenly, creating uncomfortable pressure points. Rather than scrap thousands of already manufactured seats, GM management made the calculated decision to install them in Z28s, where buyers would be less likely to complain about comfort issues during aggressive driving. The seats looked fantastic with their distinctive ribbed pattern and bolstered sides, giving the Z28 interior a genuinely sporting appearance that buyers loved in showrooms. But the underlying quality problems remained, and within a few years, many Z28 owners were experiencing exactly the seat failures that kept these components out of Corvettes. Seat frames would crack, causing the seats to feel loose and unstable. The foam would collapse unevenly, making long drives uncomfortable as pressure points developed. The solution should have been warranty replacement, but GM claimed the damage was due to owner abuse rather than defective design. Some frustrated owners actually replaced their Z28 seats with units from base Camaros that were less attractive but more durable for daily driving. Today, finding a 79 Z28 with original seats in good condition is remarkably difficult because so many failed and were replaced over the years. Reproduction seat covers are available, but they can't fix the underlying frame and foam problems that plague these hand-me-down Corvette rejects. Number 7. The Z28's air conditioning system used a completely different compressor design than other Camaros, and the reason why reveals a corporate turf war between GM divisions that resulted in thousands of cars being built with inadequate cooling capacity that left owners sweltering during summer driving. Chevrolet wanted to use the proven Harrison compressor that had been reliable for years, but GM corporate mandated that all F-body cars switch to a new Frigidaire compressor design that was supposedly more efficient and cheaper to manufacture. The Frigidaire compressor worked fine in basic Camaros with smaller engines, but it was completely overwhelmed by the heat generated by the Z28's performance engine and the underhood temperatures created by emission control equipment. The system would work adequately during cool weather or moderate temperatures, but on hot days, especially in stop-and-go traffic, the compressor couldn't produce enough cooling to keep the cabin comfortable. The problem was made worse by the Z28's mandatory black interior accents and limited ventilation design. Engineers documented the inadequate cooling capacity during testing, specifically recommending that the Z28 receive a larger compressor, but they were overruled by executives who didn't want to create a separate part number just for one model. The decision saved approximately $17 per car in manufacturing costs, while creating customer satisfaction nightmares that damaged the Z28's reputation for quality. Some dealers installed larger aftermarket compressors to solve the problem, while others told customers that adequate air conditioning wasn't possible with a performance engine, which was completely false. Today, many Z28 owners have upgraded to modern compressor designs that actually provide the cooling capacity the car should have had from the factory, but purists struggle with the choice between originality and actual functionality during summer driving conditions. Number 8. The Z28's exhaust system featured what Chevrolet called a computer-controlled dual catalytic converter setup, marketed as advanced emission control technology. But the reality reveals how GM manipulated EPA testing while selling customers inferior exhaust systems that hurt performance and reliability. The dual converter design used one small converter close to the engine for cold start emissions and a larger downstream converter for steady state operation. This configuration tested brilliantly in EPA's laboratory procedures, but had serious real-world problems. The upstream converter would overheat and break down internally, causing ceramic material to fragment and get sucked back into the engine, scoring cylinder walls and destroying rings. The downstream converter never got hot enough during short trips, loading up with deposits that restricted exhaust flow. The primitive computer controls were prone to failure, defaulting to rich fuel mixtures that fouled spark plugs and destroyed fuel economy. Chevrolet knew about these problems from pre-production testing, but certified the system anyway because it met EPA requirements on paper. Today, most surviving Z28s have replaced their exhausts with simpler aftermarket systems. Number 9. The Z28's transmission, whether manual or automatic, came with a specific gear oil that Chevrolet claimed was specially formulated for high-performance use. But internal documents show this was complete marketing fiction designed to justify charging customers more for what was actually standard transmission fluid with food coloring added to make it look different. Chevrolet contracted with their lubricant supplier to create special packaging with performance-oriented graphics and technical sounding descriptions, implying unique friction modifiers and extreme pressure additives. But laboratory analysis revealed it was chemically identical to standard gear oil used in economy cars and pickup trucks. The only difference was red dye to make customers believe they were getting something special. Dealers charged 2 or 3 times regular gear oil prices, going along with the charade because the markup was pure profit. The deception worked until an independent testing laboratory exposed the fraud. GM never officially acknowledged the scam, quietly discontinuing the special packaging. For years, Z28 owners paid ridiculous prices for colored standard fluid that offered zero advantages over cheaper alternatives. Number 10. The 79 Z28's dashboard featured a specific vacuum gauge that Chevrolet called an economy meter. And the story behind this gauge reveals a calculated attempt by GM to shift blame for terrible fuel economy onto drivers rather than admitting their emission control systems were destroying engine efficiency. The gauge was supposed to help drivers optimize fuel economy by monitoring engine vacuum with a green zone indicating efficient operation and a red zone showing wasteful driving. But the calibration was deliberately set so that achieving green zone operation required driving habits completely incompatible with the Z28's performance character, and actually dangerous in normal traffic. To stay in the green, drivers had to accelerate so slowly they'd get honked at in city traffic and struggle to merge safely onto highways. The vacuum levels required could only be achieved by lugging the engine at wide-open throttle in high gears, causing carbon buildup, overheating, and premature wear. Internal marketing memos actually stated the economy gauge was primarily a psychological tool to deflect criticism about fuel consumption. Most Z28 owners quickly learned to ignore the gauge completely because following its guidance made the car miserable to drive without improving real-world fuel economy. Today the economy gauge is widely mocked as one of the most useless dashboard instruments ever installed in a performance car. Number 11. The Z28 steering wheel looked like expensive leather-wrapped luxury, but it was actually vinyl covering cheap foam that would deteriorate into a toxic, sticky mess within just a few years of ownership. Chevrolet sourced the steering wheels from a supplier who used a new foam formulation that was supposed to be more cost-effective than traditional materials. The problem was that this foam contained plasticizers that would layage out over time when exposed to heat and ultraviolet light, causing the material to break down chemically. The deterioration process created a sticky residue that would transfer onto drivers' hands, staining clothing and requiring constant cleaning. But here's the truly disturbing part. The degrading foam released volatile organic compounds that created a distinct chemical smell inside the cabin, and some owners reported headaches and respiratory irritation during long drives. GM knew about the steering wheel degradation from early warranty claims, but decided the problem wasn't severe enough to justify a recall. Instead, they quietly changed suppliers mid-year, leaving early production cars with defective wheels. Today, finding a 79 Z28 with an original steering wheel in good condition is nearly impossible, and most have been replaced with aftermarket alternatives or wheels from later model years that use different materials. Number 12. And the Z28's windshield washer system used a reservoir mounted in the engine compartment that was positioned directly above the exhaust manifold, and this placement created a bizarre safety hazard that resulted in at least 3 documented engine fires. The plastic reservoir would heat up from exhaust manifold radiation, causing the washer fluid inside to expand and pressurize. Over time, the heat would degrade the plastic, making it brittle and prone to cracking. When the reservoir failed, it would dump washer fluid directly onto the hot exhaust manifold, and the alcohol-based fluid would ignite instantly. The fires were typically small and self-extinguishing, but they created dramatic flames shooting from under the hood that terrified drivers. GM engineers had tested the reservoir location and knew it would get hot, but they calculated the plastic could withstand normal temperatures. What they didn't account for was cars driven hard in hot climates, where underhood temperatures would exceed the plastic's heat tolerance. The problem was made worse by some owners using homemade washer fluid mixtures with higher alcohol content that were more flammable than commercial products. GM issued a service bulletin relocating the reservoir to a cooler location, but only some dealers performed the modification. Today, many Z28s still have the original dangerous reservoir location, and owners are completely unaware they're driving with a potential fire hazard under the hood. Number 13. The Z28's rear window defogger system was an expensive option that most buyers ordered for cold weather visibility. But the system had a fatal design flaw that would eventually destroy the rear window glass itself. The defogger grid was bonded to the glass using an adhesive that couldn't handle the thermal expansion differences between the glass and the metallic heating elements. When the defogger was activated, the heating elements would expand at a different rate than the glass, creating stress points along the grid lines. Over repeated heating and cooling cycles, these stress points would develop into micro cracks in the glass that were invisible at first but would gradually spread. The cracks would typically start at the edges of the defogger grid and propagate outward, eventually causing the entire rear window to shatter, sometimes explosively while driving. The problem was worst in cold climates where the defogger was used most frequently and where temperature differentials between inside and outside were greatest. GM knew about the cracking issue from testing, but they calculated that most failures would occur outside the warranty period, making it the owner's financial problem rather than GM's. Some dealerships quietly warned customers not to use the defogger unless absolutely necessary, advice that defeated the entire purpose of the expensive option. Today, finding a Z28 with its original rear glass intact and uncracked is difficult, and many have been replaced multiple times over the decades. Number 14. The Z28's brake system used front disc brakes that were supposed to be vented for better cooling, but cost-cutting measures during production resulted in thousands of cars receiving solid rotors that would overheat dangerously during hard braking. The problem started when GM's brake rotor supplier fell behind on production of vented rotors and couldn't meet demand for the '79 model year launch. Rather than delay car deliveries, GM made the decision to temporarily install solid rotors from base model Camaros until vented rotors became available. The substitution was supposed to last only a few weeks, but the vented rotor shortage continued for months, resulting in approximately 4,000 Z28s being built with inadequate brakes. The solid rotors would heat up rapidly under the demands of performance driving, causing brake fade that could be genuinely frightening. Some owners reported complete brake failure during mountain driving when the rotors got so hot they couldn't transfer heat away fast enough. The overheating would also warp the rotors, causing pulsing brake pedals and uneven braking that was both annoying and dangerous. GM never issued a recall or even acknowledged the substitution publicly. Dealers were quietly authorized to replace solid rotors with vented versions under warranty if customers complained, but many owners never knew they had the wrong rotors and simply suffered with poor braking performance. Number 15. The Z28's fuel tank was manufactured from coated steel that was supposed to resist corrosion, but the coating process was defective for several months of production, resulting in tanks that would rust from the inside out and contaminate fuel systems with debris. The problem was caused by a change in the coating application procedure at the tank manufacturer's facility. Workers were supposed to rotate tanks during the coating spray process to ensure complete coverage, but new automated equipment didn't rotate the tanks properly, leaving bare metal patches on the top surfaces. These uncoated areas would rust when exposed to moisture and fuel, creating iron oxide particles that would break loose and circulate through the fuel system. The contamination would clog fuel filters, damage fuel pumps, and cause carburetor jets to plug up, creating running problems that were difficult to diagnose. Mechanics would replace filters and carburetors without realizing the fuel tank itself was the source of contamination. The rusting would also weaken the tank structure, and some tanks actually developed leaks that created fire hazards. GM discovered the coating defect during a quality audit, but thousands of defective tanks had already been installed. The company made the calculated decision to handle failures through warranty rather than recall all affected cars. Today, many Z28s have had their original fuel tanks replaced due to rust and contamination problems, and buyers should be wary of cars that still have original tanks from early production. Number 16. The Z28's hood scoop was purely decorative and non-functional, but what most people don't know is that Chevrolet actually designed a functional ram air system for the scoop and had it ready for production before canceling it at the last minute for reasons that had nothing to do with engineering. The functional hood scoop system had been fully developed and tested, showing a measurable power increase of 8 to 12 horsepower at highway speeds from the cold air induction effect. The system used a sealed airbox under the hood scoop that would force outside air directly into the carburetor, bypassing the hot engine compartment air. Dyno testing confirmed the performance benefits, and the system was ready to be offered as an option package. But GM's legal department intervened, warning that a functional hood scoop could be interpreted as a defeat device under EPA regulations because it would alter the emission control system's calibration. The lawyers argued that offering ram air could invite regulatory scrutiny that might affect GM's entire vehicle lineup. Management decided the risk wasn't worth the minimal performance gain, so they canceled the functional scoop program, but kept the decorative scoop for styling purposes. This created the absurd situation where the Z28 had an aggressive-looking hood scoop that did absolutely nothing except add weight and create aerodynamic drag. Some enterprising owners later modified their scoops to be functional using aftermarket kits, but most Z28s retain their useless decorative scoops that represent GM's fear of regulators. Number 17. The Z28's door panels used a specific textured vinyl that was advertised as durable and easy to clean. But the material had a bizarre property that nobody discovered until cars had been in customer hands for several months. The vinyl would develop a static electrical charge in dry climates that was strong enough to deliver painful shocks to occupants when they touched metal door handles or window cranks. The problem was caused by the vinyl's chemical composition and the way it interacted with synthetic fabrics and clothing. As people slid across the seats, friction would build up enormous static charges that would discharge through the first conductive path, usually the door hardware. The shocks were sometimes strong enough to cause muscle spasms and leave visible sparks. Some owners in desert states reported getting shocked every single time they exited their cars, making driving the Z28 a genuinely painful experience. GM investigated the complaints and confirmed the static buildup problem, but they had no easy solution. Adding conductive materials to the vinyl would have required retooling and redesigning the entire interior. Instead, they published a technical bulletin suggesting owners use anti-static spray or dryer sheets on the door panels, which was a temporary fix at best. The static problem was worse in cars with cloth interiors because the fabric seats generated more friction than vinyl. Today, the door panel static issue is mostly forgotten, but owners in dry climates still occasionally experience shocking reminders of this weird Malaise-era quality problem. Number 18. The Z28's radio antenna was a power unit that automatically extended when the radio was turned on. And this fancy feature became one of the most failure-prone components on the entire car, due to a design flaw that Chevrolet knew about but never fixed. The antenna motor was mounted inside the front fender, where it was exposed to road spray, salt, and debris thrown up by the front tire. The motor housing was supposed to be waterproof, but the seals were inadequate and would allow moisture to enter within months of normal driving. Once water got inside the motor, the internal gears would rust and bind, causing the antenna to stick in either the extended or retracted position. The motor would continue trying to move the stuck antenna, burning itself out and sometimes catching fire from the electrical overload. The problem was universal, affecting virtually every Z28 with the power antenna option, regardless of climate or driving conditions. Dealers replaced thousands of antenna motors under warranty, but the replacements would fail just as quickly because they had the same design flaws. Some frustrated owners simply disconnected the power antenna and installed manual antennas, losing the convenience feature they had paid extra for. GM knew the antenna motor location was problematic from testing, but moving it would have required expensive body modifications. Today, finding a Z28 with a working original power antenna is extremely rare, and most have been replaced with modern aftermarket units or manual antennas. Number 19. The Z28's optional T-top roof panels were manufactured from tinted glass that was supposed to reduce heat and glare, but the glass formulation contained a UV blocking compound that would gradually turn purple when exposed to sunlight, creating panels that looked diseased and ruined the car's appearance. The purple tint wasn't immediate, but would develop slowly over several years of sun exposure, starting as a faint pinkish hue and gradually darkening to a deep purple that couldn't be reversed or removed. The discoloration was caused by manganese dioxide in the glass reacting with ultraviolet radiation, a chemical process that had been known to occur in old bottles and windows, but that GM's glass supplier apparently didn't anticipate in automotive applications. By the mid-80s, thousands of Z28 T-top panels were turning purple, and owners were furious about the appearance degradation. GM initially denied there was any defect, claiming the purple tint was a natural aging characteristic of glass. But internal documents show they knew the manganese dioxide would cause discoloration, and that they'd chosen the glass formula anyway because it was cheaper than alternatives. Replacement panels were eventually offered, but GM made owners pay for them, even though the problem was clearly a manufacturing defect. Today, purple T-tops are actually considered collectible by some enthusiasts as authentic period artifacts, but most owners prefer to replace them with reproduction panels that don't have the discoloration problem. Number 20. The final weird fact about the '79 Z28 is that every single car built contained at least one part from a completely different GM vehicle. And this wasn't accidental, but rather a deliberate corporate strategy to reduce manufacturing costs by raiding the parts bins of every division. Engineers were under intense pressure to build the Z28 as cheaply as possible while maintaining the appearance of a performance car. So they scoured GM's entire parts catalog looking for components that could be borrowed from other vehicles. The result was a Frankenstein car assembled from bits and pieces of Corvettes, Caprices, Monte Carlos, Oldsmobiles, Buicks, and even trucks. Some borrowing made sense, like using Corvette suspension bushings, but other choices were bizarre, like door lock cylinders from Cadillac Sevilles and window regulators from full-size pickup trucks. The parts mixing created quality inconsistencies because components designed for different vehicles often didn't work quite right in the Z28 application. It also created a nightmare for restoration because determining what's original requires knowing which parts came from which donor vehicles. Today, the parts bin rating is seen as both clever engineering and corporate cheapness, representing the compromises necessary to keep performance cars alive during the malaise era when every dollar counted.